The Galactic Council had never been in such a state of confusion before. Its great chambers, floating in orbit above a neutral star, buzzed with worry. Hundreds of delegates from dozens of worlds gathered, each species more anxious than the last. They had all heard the message, or rather, the absence of one. For weeks, humanity had gone silent. Not a single human envoy had responded to calls, invitations, or emergencies. The usual hum of negotiation, the subtle games of diplomacy, had vanished as if it had never existed. Not at first. Many council members assumed it was a temporary retreat. Humans had been known for their unpredictability, for sudden decisions that seemed reckless until they revealed their brilliance. But this silence was different. Weeks turned into months, and still no communication came from Earth or any of its colonies. And now, the Council was beginning to fear what this meant. The assembly hall was enormous, a structure of polished metal that reflected the colors of the countless stars visible outside. Delegates moved slowly, speaking in hushed tones. There, voices carrying the weight of centuries of diplomacy. Some species had dozens of arms, others glided above the floor, and some were entirely composed of light and energy. Despite their differences, all shared the same growing unease. The humans have always been unpredictable. One delegate whispered to another, a deep rumble of sound vibrating through the hall. But never like this. To sever all contact? That is ... unheard of. Across the hall, the leader of a long-lived species, known for their logical thinking, tapped a claw against the railing. "I have reviewed their history," they said, voice calm but tense. "They have a pattern. When they retreat, it is not from fear. It is strategic. They withdraw only when preparing for something large, something we cannot yet see." Others nodded, though some felt a chill of worry. The humans were primitive, by many standards. Their technology was advancing fast, but compared to some civilizations, they were still young. Yet every record showed that humans were resilient, creative, and fiercely protective of their own. Time and again, they had defied odds, survived disasters, and even turned apparent defeats into triumphs. A young delegate from a watery world shivered. Could it be war? "Are they preparing to strike?" The elder shook their head. "I do not think so. Humans rarely act without reason. If they were planning a war, they would have shown signs, movements of fleets, open preparations. What worries me is their silence. It is deliberate. They are sending a message, but we do not yet understand it." Outside the council chambers, satellites monitored Earth. They saw cities glowing, ships moving across space lanes, and human activity that seemed normal at first glance. Yet deeper scans revealed a different story. Humans had fortified their colonies. They had begun constructing massive defense networks, automated systems that could respond to threats faster than any other species could imagine. There was no sign of aggression, but every indicator showed preparation. Something was coming, but what? Inside the council, debates grew louder. Some delegates wanted to send emissaries to attempt dialogue, to remind humanity of their place within the galactic order. Others warned against approaching. They argued that humans, once provoked, could not be controlled. History had proven it. One species had even lost an entire outpost to a human force they had underestimated, thinking the humans were weak and ill-prepared. "Perhaps we should wait," suggested a delegate whose body shifted like liquid. "Let them reveal themselves. Humans are not like us. They act in ways we cannot predict. To force them may be fatal," but others shook their heads. Waiting could be worse. If this is the calm before a storm, we may not survive the first strike. We must act before they decide we are enemies. The council divided into factions, a rare occurrence among the usually united members. Tensions flared. Delegates argued for hours, voices rising, glowing, vibrating across the chamber. no consensus was reached. All that remained was fear, uncertainty, and a growing realization that humans had changed the rules of engagement without anyone noticing. Meanwhile, on Earth, humans went about their lives, unaware of the panic their silence had caused. Scientists tested new propulsion systems, engineers built massive energy grids, and every government moved quietly, deliberately, to strengthen humanity's position in space. There was no arrogance in their actions, only practicality. They had learned long ago that the galaxy was vast, often dangerous, and filled with civilizations that did not always act fairly. Trust was not given, it was earned. It was not vengeance that guided humanity's decision to withdraw from the Council. It was clarity. They had grown too fast, learned too much, and watched too closely as other species bent rules, hid secrets, and occasionally attacked those weaker than themselves. Humanity's place in the galaxy was no longer one of dependence. They had survived famine, war, and catastrophe on their own planet. They had extended into space. And now they chose to walk their own path. In the council chambers, the worry was palpable. Leaders spoke of intelligence reports, of fleets, of possible allies. Every possibility was considered and dismissed in fear. No one truly understood humans. Their unpredictability was their greatest strength, and the council was realizing, perhaps too late, that they had underestimated it for decades. A delegate from a desert world, known for its history of survival through harsh conditions, leaned forward. "We cannot know their minds," they said quietly, "but we do know their history. Every time humans have faced a challenge too great, they have not only survived, they have risen. What they are doing now is not fear. It is a decision. One, we must respect, or we risk our own destruction." Others nodded reluctantly. There was an unspoken agreement that humans were no longer to be treated as a young civilization. They had earned a reputation not through diplomacy, not through charm, but through action, intelligence, and an unbreakable will. And now, by withdrawing, humans were showing the galaxy exactly what they had learned. Dependence on others was optional, but self-reliance was absolute. As the meeting continued, the council members faced a grim truth. Humans had broken all communication, not because they could not negotiate, but because they had decided to no longer rely on anyone to define their place in the galaxy. For the first time, the council understood that this silence was not a pause. It was a declaration. Humanity was ready to stand alone. The chamber fell into silence as this realization sank in. Hundreds of delegates, representing countless civilizations, looked at one another with a shared understanding. The galaxy had changed. Humans, once considered a minor player in galactic politics, had grown beyond expectation. They had done what no one thought possible. They had forced the galaxy to reconsider its assumptions without firing a single weapon or uttering a single threat. Outside, stars shone as they always had, indifferent to the anxieties of alien races. Yet somewhere in the solar system, humans watched the same stars, focused on building, learning, and preparing. They were quiet, deliberate, and patient. And the galaxy, for the first time, feared not the humans' aggression, but their independence. After the shocking silence from humanity had settled in the Galactic Council, the delegates turned to the only tool they had left: history. They pored over records, archives, and old transmissions, trying to understand what humans might be thinking. It was a laborious task. Humanity's history was long, complex, and full of contradictions. They were a young species in galactic terms, but their records showed a pattern of resilience that no one could ignore. Council members studied every major human event with growing fascination and fear. They saw how humans had survived natural disasters that wiped out entire regions of their planet. They noted how humans had risen from wars and conflicts that would have ended other species. Every time humans faced extinction-level threats, they had not only survived, they had evolved, adapted, and often come out stronger. What are they planning? A delegate asked nervously. Their voice was high-pitched and musical, like a string being plucked. To break all diplomacy, they must be preparing something catastrophic. An older delegate, whose skin shimmered with the colors of their home. Sun shook their head. No, humans are not like that. They do not act out of cruelty or malice. Their history shows strategy, patience, and a deep sense of self-preservation. They withdraw when they need to grow stronger, not to destroy others. Still, there were moments that made even the calmest members uneasy. They found examples of humans reacting violently when cornered. Tribes and nations that had once seemed peaceful had turned fiercely defensive when their survival was threatened. There were countless stories of humans taking impossible risks, fighting against overwhelming odds and winning. The more the Council studied, the clearer it became. Humans were not to be underestimated. Delegates compared humanity's silence to previous incidents, like the expansion of human colonies beyond their home planet. Other species had thought humans would struggle with the vastness of space. Many predicted that humans would fail to maintain colonies, fall into chaos, or be absorbed by larger civilizations. Instead, humans thrived. They created advanced technology, mastered space travel, and established outposts far from Earth, all while maintaining a sense of unity that other species found difficult to comprehend. They are always adapting, said a delegate whose form constantly shifted like flowing water. And yet, they are unpredictable. We do not understand their next move. That is what makes them dangerous or remarkable. Perhaps both. Some delegates grew anxious as they read reports of human innovation. New weapons, advanced shields, energy grids, and automated fleets were all mentioned in the records. Even more troubling were hints of projects that were never fully documented. Experiments and research that humans seemed to conduct quietly, without alerting anyone else. These things were not threatening yet, but the potential was staggering. Outside the council chambers, intelligence drones observed human worlds. They saw people building massive orbital stations, equipping ships that could travel vast distances, without refueling. There were no signs of offensive movement, yet the sheer scale of their preparation suggested humans were thinking ahead. Every action humans took seemed deliberate, calculated, and quietly confident. Some delegates suggested reaching out again. They argued that humans had been part of the council for decades, and that dialogue could still prevent disaster. Others warned that this approach was dangerous. Humans had clearly decided that the council had failed them. They had witnessed corruption, hidden agendas, and attacks against their colonies, often from members of the council itself. To humans, the council had become unreliable, and attempting diplomacy now might be seen as weakness. A representative from a crystalline species leaned forward, their voice tinged with worry. History shows humans respond to injustice more than anything else. They are fair when treated fairly, but if wronged, they act with precision and force. The council must not underestimate that. The more the council studied humans, the more they realized that the species had learned to rely on itself. Unlike other civilizations that depended on alliances, treaties, or long-standing agreements, humans had built a system that prioritized self-sufficiency. They had become masters of logistics, defense, and strategy, often using simplicity and ingenuity in ways that other species found baffling. The council began to notice patterns in human behavior that suggested long-term planning. Humans often withdrew from situations that seemed chaotic or untrustworthy. They avoided risks that were unnecessary, yet they never hesitated when action was required. This paradox was confusing to the delegates. They were used to civilizations that acted according to rigid rules, predictable strategies, and long-standing agreements. Humans did not follow these patterns. They are always one step ahead, a delegate admitted quietly. Even when they do not seem to be acting, they are thinking, planning, learning, and when they do act, it is decisive and often final. We must not treat silence as weakness. Some members of the council became obsessed with understanding humans. They spent hours analyzing communications, decoding messages, even reviewing old human conflicts on Earth. They noted the importance humans placed on survival, freedom, and ingenuity. They noticed that humans were capable of incredible cooperation, yet fiercely independent. They could work together to achieve impossible goals, but they would never be forced to follow commands from an untrusted authority. A few delegates became uneasy about the possibility that humans had reached a technological level beyond their understanding. If humans were building defenses and fleets quietly, as the intelligence suggested, then the Council had no real measure of human power. The reports hinted at technology that was clever, practical, and almost invisible until it was too late. This made the Council members feel vulnerable. They realized that humans had grown stronger than anyone had anticipated, and now they were choosing to stand apart. The Council debated whether to attempt one last contact. Some argued that even a single transmission could prevent misunderstandings. Others warned that humans might interpret outreach as provocation. The debates went on for hours, then days, with no clear resolution. Every plan seemed flawed, every suggestion risky. The truth was simple but terrifying. The Council no longer understood humans, and that was a dangerous position to be in. Meanwhile, humans continued their work quietly. Scientists developed new energy systems, engineers strengthened defenses, and pilots trained for long missions beyond familiar space. There was no panic, no boastful announcements, no messages sent to the Council. They were calm, deliberate, and focused. Every action was purposeful, every step part of a larger plan that only they fully understood. Humans did not act out of anger or fear. They acted out of necessity and foresight. They had learned from their history that relying too much on others could be dangerous. They had been attacked, betrayed, and underestimated countless times. Every lesson had been recorded, every failure used as fuel for growth. They had built a civilization that could survive almost anything, and now they had chosen to test it in the wider galaxy. In the Council, fear grew into awe. Humans were no longer just another member of the galactic community. They were a species that had taken control of its destiny and demanded to be respected on its own terms. The silence was no longer a mystery, it was a statement. Humans had decided that their future would not be dictated by the Council, by treaties, or by the expectations of other species. They would chart their own path. Delegates realized that humans' withdrawal was not a threat, at least not yet. It was a challenge, a subtle reminder that the galaxy could not control them. The Council had underestimated humans for too long, assuming that diplomacy alone could manage their ambitions. They had been wrong. Humans were not like other civilizations. They did not fear isolation. They feared dependence. And for the first time, the Council saw the full weight of that lesson. The chamber fell silent as delegates reflected on what this meant for the galaxy. Humans were quiet, prepared, and patient. They were not seeking vengeance, but they would not allow weakness to dictate their actions. The Council understood that the humans' next moves would not be reckless or emotional. They would be calculated, deliberate, and effective. And so the Council waited. Every member understood that the galaxy had changed. Humans had grown beyond expectation, and their silence spoke louder than any words. For the first time, species across countless worlds realized that they feared not the humans' violence, but their independence. Humans were ready to stand alone, and the galaxy had no choice but to watch. As weeks turned into months, the Galactic Council grew increasingly uneasy. It wasn't just the silence from humanity that troubled them anymore. There were incidents at the edges of human-controlled space that hinted at deeper mysteries. Small fleets of unknown origin had been detected near human colonies, appearing and disappearing without warning. Some claimed these fleets were pirates. Others suggested rival civilizations, but no one knew for sure. What everyone agreed on was that the humans had responded in ways that no one had expected. Observers noted that human defense systems had engaged these unknown ships. Yet there were no massive battles, no galactic alerts, no signs of panic. The intruders were repelled quickly and efficiently, often before anyone outside the human territories even noticed. Every encounter seemed almost effortless, a demonstration of capability that left even the most seasoned council members stunned. Humans had become a force that acted without fanfare, without drama, and without revealing their true strength. Inside the council chambers, debate reached a new level of urgency. Delegates argued over what these incidents might mean. Were humans preparing for war? Were they simply protecting their borders? Or, more frightening, had they discovered something in space that no one else had, giving them an advantage that the council could not predict? "They are responding," a delegate said quietly, their voice trembling. "But not in a way we understand. Every time we think we have a measure of them, they do something unexpected. Their actions are deliberate, but their intentions are invisible. It is as if they are testing us." Others nodded grimly. There was a shared understanding that humans were no longer just participants in the galactic order. They were rewriting the rules. History had shown that humans were adaptable, creative, and unyielding when their survival or principles were at stake. Now, through silence and subtle demonstrations of power, they had taken control of the narrative. The mysterious border incidents sparked a flurry of intelligence gathering. Sensors were placed near human colonies, observation drones were launched, and long-range scans were intensified. Yet every time someone thought they had uncovered a secret, humans quietly adapted. Ships were relocated, communications were encrypted, and patterns that had once been predictable disappeared entirely. The council realized that humans were not only advanced, they were thinking ahead, planning for scenarios that no one else could anticipate. One particularly anxious delegate, representing a species known for its strict adherence to protocol, spoke during a council session. "If these unknown fleets are threats, why have humans not requested assistance? Why have they not appealed to the council for guidance? Their silence suggests confidence, not fear. We cannot ignore this. Their capacity is growing faster than any of us realized, and they are preparing for something that may involve the entire galaxy." A seasoned representative from a long-lived species with multiple eyes and layered senses responded thoughtfully. "Humans do not seek guidance when they are capable of acting on their own. History teaches us that they are resourceful, independent, and strategic. They will withdraw from influence or interference because they understand their strength and the risks of relying on others. That is their pattern. We should not see it as hostility. It is simply how they operate." Despite these reassurances, anxiety continued to spread. Reports of strange fleets and unusual technology were becoming more common. Some members of the council suggested sending emissaries to make contact, hoping that even a brief dialogue could prevent escalation. Others warned that approaching humans without understanding their motives could be seen as weakness, even provocation. The debate grew heated, reflecting the council's growing fear of the unknown. Meanwhile, humans went about their preparations quietly. On Earth, scientists and engineers continued to develop systems that were highly advanced, but designed to appear ordinary to outsiders. Massive energy networks were constructed to support long-term missions. Ships capable of traveling great distances without resupply were tested. Every step was measured, every action precise, reflecting the lessons humanity had learned from its own history. Humans did not act out of arrogance. They acted from necessity and foresight. They had been underestimated repeatedly by other species, often with disastrous results for those species. They had been betrayed, attacked, and challenged, yet they survived and thrived. Their approach now was simple: preparation, patience, and self-reliance. The galaxy might speculate, but humans remained focused on what mattered to them most, ensuring their survival and freedom. Intelligence reports from within human territory painted a picture of discipline and organization. Colonies operated with high efficiency. Automated defense systems monitored every possible approach, and training programs ensured that humans were ready for any scenario. Outsiders could not fully understand the scale of this preparation, nor could they predict how humans would respond if challenged. Some council members feared that humans were planning to take control, but those who knew human history argued otherwise. Humans rarely sought power for its own sake. They valued independence, resilience, and the ability to make their own choices. Their withdrawal from the council was not an aggressive act. It was a declaration that they would no longer depend on others to dictate their place in the galaxy. The mysterious fleets near human borders continued to provoke speculation. Every time a council member suggested a possible explanation, evidence quickly emerged that humans had anticipated it. Ships that were thought to be scouting vessels were revealed to be decoys. Communications that seemed intercepted were encrypted in ways that no other species could decode. It became clear that humans were not simply reacting, they were guiding events, quietly demonstrating control without drawing attention to themselves. Council sessions grew longer and more tense. Delegates debated strategy, intelligence, and diplomacy, yet no consensus was reached. Every scenario seemed risky, every action uncertain. For the first time, members of the council began to admit that humans had moved beyond prediction. They were no longer a civilization to be monitored. They were a force to be understood. If that was even possible. One observer, a delegate whose species had survived multiple galactic conflicts, voiced what many were thinking. We have underestimated them for too long. They are young, yes, but their ability to adapt, to plan, to survive is unlike anything we have seen. We do not know what they want, but we do know that they are no longer reliant on us. That alone changes everything. The council faced a difficult choice. They could attempt diplomacy, risking misunderstanding. They could prepare for potential conflict, risking escalation. Or they could wait, hoping that humanity's intentions were not harmful. Every option carried danger, yet none seemed likely to influence humans' decisions. Silence, it seemed, was the most powerful tool humanity possessed. Humans themselves were aware of the council's concern, though they did not respond. Their focus remained on preparation, observation, and ensuring that every possible challenge could be met. They worked with precision, coordination, and a quiet confidence that unnerved even the most experienced delegates. Over time, a new understanding began to take shape within the council. Humans were not merely participants in galactic politics. They were independent agents, capable of acting on their own terms. They had withdrawn from diplomacy, not out of fear, but because they had outgrown the need for oversight. The galaxy, for the first time, saw the full extent of human resilience, creativity, and determination. Even as mysterious fleets continued to appear near human borders, the council realized that humans were not the ones creating uncertainty. It was the council itself, with its assumptions, fears, and underestimation, that had allowed humans to gain the upper hand. Humanity's silence was not weakness, it was strength. Their independence was not a threat, it was a statement of confidence in their own abilities. In quiet moments, some delegates reflected on what this meant for the galaxy. Humans had survived threats that would have ended other civilizations. They had grown stronger through adversity, learned from every mistake, and developed a level of discipline and innovation that no one could fully grasp: their withdrawal from. The Council was not the start of war. It was the start of a new reality, one in which humans defined their own destiny. For the first time, the Council faced a species they could not predict, control, or influence. Humans were no longer dependent on alliances, treaties, or approval. They were a civilization that had learned to survive on its own, and now they had chosen to step away from the Council entirely. The silence from humanity continued, punctuated only by the occasional border incident or unusual activity observed by distant intelligence drones. Every action humans took was measured, deliberate, and quietly effective. They did not boast, they did not threaten, and they did not explain themselves. And yet, through their actions and their silence, they communicated a powerful truth. Humanity had grown, adapted, and matured. The galaxy had underestimated them, and now it would pay attention. The Council, once confident in its authority, realized that the humans had already outpaced them. They had learned that words and appearances could be misleading, but action quiet. Deliberate and effective revealed true power. Humanity's withdrawal was not chaos. It was Klar. As time passed, the silence from humanity became more than just unusual. It became a statement. Entire human embassies across the galaxy had shut down, leaving vast halls empty, unused communication channels dormant, and countless delegates bewildered. Every attempt to send a message went unanswered. Some speculated that humans were angry. Others feared they were planning something aggressive. Few dared consider the most likely truth. Humans had simply decided they no longer needed anyone's approval. Council members watched with growing concern. The space lanes leading toward human territories were no longer quiet avenues of trade and travel. They were heavily monitored by automated systems the Council had only recently detected. These defenses were not obvious weapons. They were precise, efficient, and silently effective. Any vessel approaching without clearance was turned away, often before anyone outside the human systems noticed. Humans had created a network of observation and protection that made their colonies almost untouchable. It is as if they are building invisible walls. A delegate noted during one meeting, "Nothing that can be seen until it is too late." They are preparing, but not for battle. That is the most unnerving part. Others nodded, realizing that humans' methods were unlike anything they had seen. In other species, expansion and defense were flashy, designed to demonstrate power. Humans, however, seemed to operate differently. Their technology was advanced, but it was subtle, hidden, and integrated into daily operations. It was designed for efficiency, not intimidation. And yet, every council member who examined the reports felt a growing sense of unease. The humans' quiet competence suggested they were far beyond what anyone had previously estimated. Some council members wanted to push for contact again, to send emissaries or open channels in hopes of preventing misunderstandings. But a seasoned delegate with thousands of cycles of experience advised caution. Humans do not respond to pressure or coercion. That is their pattern. They act when they choose to act, and they withdraw when they choose to withdraw. Attempts to force engagement may be interpreted as threats. Intelligence reports revealed more surprises. Human colonies had become models of self-sufficiency. Energy grids were capable of sustaining entire systems independently. Ships were equipped with advanced navigation systems that allowed them to travel vast distances without support. Automated fleets patrolled silently, able to respond to threats before anyone could intervene. The humans were no longer reliant on the Council or any other species. They had built their own future, and they intended to protect it on their terms. Observers grew fascinated as they noted how humans had transformed. Some species were aggressive in claiming territory, some relied heavily on alliances, and some depended on sheer numbers to maintain control. Humans did none of these things. They did not boast, they did not demand attention, and they did not show off. They focused quietly on building their capacity, their knowledge, and their independence. And in that quiet focus, they had become powerful in ways the council could barely measure. Delegates discussed the implications at length. If humans had withdrawn completely from diplomacy, it meant they were no longer bound by the council's influence. They could make decisions independently, free from the constraints of treaties or expectations. Some feared that humans might become a wild card, unpredictable and potentially dangerous. Others saw it as a natural evolution of a species that had survived countless hardships. A representative of a species that had long studied humans spoke up. They are not reckless. They are strategic. Every action or lack of action is deliberate. Their withdrawal is not a sign of weakness. It is a demonstration of self-reliance. That is something most civilizations do not understand until it is too late. Council members realized that humans' quiet strength was changing the balance of power. They were no longer participants in the traditional diplomatic structure. They were a force that demanded respect, whether the council acknowledged it or not. The very fact that humans could withdraw without fear of retaliation or isolation was a testament to their ingenuity and resilience. Meanwhile, humans continued their preparations in silence. Scientists studied energy sources, engineers reinforced infrastructure, and strategists analyzed potential scenarios across the galaxy. Every colony functioned like a small, self-sufficient unit, connected by shared knowledge and advanced communication systems. There was no panic, no unnecessary aggression, only quiet, deliberate effort. Humans had learned from their history that survival required foresight. They had experienced betrayal, conflict, and hardship on their home planet. They had been underestimated, attacked, and dismissed by older civilizations. Each lesson had been recorded, analyzed, and incorporated into their strategy for independence. Their silence was a continuation of this careful planning. Intelligence reports suggested that humans were not just defending themselves, they were positioning for future expansion, exploration, and discovery. They were studying distant star systems, preparing for potential challenges, and ensuring that no threat could catch them unprepared. Every action was measured, every decision intentional. Humans had become masters of foresight, capable of predicting outcomes and preparing. Accordingly, some council members expressed frustration. We have treaties, agreements, and centuries of experience. Why are humans ignoring all of it? Why are they acting as if the council does not exist? Others responded calmly. Because to humans, the council no longer matters. They have grown beyond dependence. They respect cooperation when it is earned, but they do not need validation or oversight. That is the source of their strength, and it is a strength we cannot match if we continue to think in the old ways. As discussions continued, reports came in of human colonies quietly assisting one another in ways that were difficult to detect. Supplies, knowledge, and technology were shared efficiently, often before problems arose. There was no fanfare, no public declaration, just quiet support and coordination. Humans had created a network of cooperation that was invisible to outsiders, but highly effective. Delegates began to understand that humans had redefined what it meant to be independent. They did not rely on alliances to survive. They did not need the council to protect them. They had built a civilization capable of sustaining itself, protecting itself, and growing without interference. And now, by withdrawing from diplomacy, they had made it clear that they would not allow anyone else to dictate their future. Some members of the council grew anxious, imagining what humans might do next. They feared that the silence could conceal preparation for conflict. Yet those who studied human history understood that humans rarely sought unnecessary confrontation. They acted decisively when threatened, but they did not provoke conflict for its own sake. Their independence was not aggression, it was self-determination. Humans themselves remained focused on practical matters. Colonies thrived, fleets patrolled quietly, and research continued. There was no concern for reputation, politics, or approval from others. Every action was grounded in necessity and foresight. Humans had learned that relying on others could be dangerous, so they had taken responsibility for their own survival and future. The Council began to realize that humanity's silence was more powerful than any weapon. It forced other species to consider their assumptions, to reevaluate strategies, and to acknowledge that humans had grown beyond the familiar structures of diplomacy. They were no longer a minor player, they were a force in their own right. A senior delegate summarized the sentiment in the Council. We feared their aggression, but we should fear something else entirely, their independence. They have withdrawn because they can. They do not need us, they do not need our approval, and they do not need our guidance. That is their power. That is what makes them different from any species we have known. Outside the chambers, human activity continued quietly. Ships moved efficiently, systems were monitored, and colonies thrived. There was no announcement, no proclamation, no attempt to intimidate. Humans had learned that action spoke louder than words, and their actions communicated their strength clearly to those who were paying attention. The Council understood that the galaxy had entered a new era. Humanity had withdrawn from diplomacy, not because they feared others, but because they had learned to rely on themselves. They had grown capable, resilient, and independent, and they had made a deliberate choice to stand alone. For the first time, the Council realized that silence could be a statement and preparation could be a message. Humans had sent both, without a single word, without a single threat. And in doing so, they had changed the perception of power across the galaxy. Delegates reflected on what this meant for the future. Humans were no longer bound by treaties, alliances, or expectations. They would act on their own terms, guided by foresight, ingenuity, and an unyielding sense of independence. The galaxy had underestimated them for too long. Now it had no choice but to watch. Humans had proven that true power did not always require loud declarations or aggressive action. It could be quiet, deliberate, and unseen until the moment it mattered most. And through their silence, they had taught the galaxy a lesson that would not be forgotten. Underestimate humanity at your own risk. The Galactic Council was in a state of mounting panic. Every new report from the edges of human territory brought a mixture of fear and awe. Humans had not just withdrawn from diplomacy. They had quietly created defenses and systems that no other species could match. Automated fleets patrolled in silence. Colonies shared resources efficiently. And technology that had once seemed impossible was now operational across human-controlled space. Every observation only deepened the Council's unease. Debates in the Council grew heated. Some delegates argued that immediate action was necessary. They wanted to send emissaries, fleets, or even small forces to make contact or assert authority. Others warned that any such action could backfire. Humans did not respond to threats in the ways other species expected. They were patient, strategic, and decisive when necessary. Any provocation could be disastrous. A representative of a highly analytical species spoke up. We cannot underestimate them. Their silence is not weakness. It is strength. They have built defenses, perfected logistics, and ensured that every colony is self-sufficient. They are capable of responding to threats before we even notice them. We are no longer in a position to act without caution. Yet fear had already begun to take hold in the minds of many delegates. They imagined humans preparing for a preemptive strike or worse, secretly expanding their influence while the Council debated what to do. Some whispered about hidden fleets, experimental weapons, or advanced technologies, that no one had detected yet. The Council's intelligence services worked tirelessly, but humans had always found ways to conceal their true capabilities until the moment of action. Outside the chambers, humanity continued its work quietly. Scientists analyzed energy sources. Engineers strengthened infrastructure, and strategic planners studied galactic maps to anticipate potential challenges. Every colony was a model of efficiency and coordination. Resources were shared, threats were anticipated, and contingencies were planned. There was no fanfare, no announcements, no attempts to provoke attention. Humans acted with calm precision, guided by knowledge, experience, and foresight. Reports from intelligence drones painted a remarkable picture. Human fleets moved in patterns that seemed random, yet every movement had purpose. Supply ships followed secure routes, avoiding detection, while automated defense systems quietly monitored space. Every colony had multiple layers of protection, many of which remained invisible to outsiders. Humans had not just prepared, they had prepared in ways the Council could barely comprehend. Within the Council, anxiety turned to urgency. Delegates debated whether to attempt last-minute diplomacy, fearing that humans might take actions that could not be reversed. Some argued that a message, even a single transmission, might prevent escalation. Others insisted that any outreach could be interpreted as weakness, and humans might respond unpredictably. The debate raged for hours, yet no clear path emerged. One elder delegate finally spoke, voice calm but filled with concern. "We have underestimated them for too long. Every record, every incident, and every report shows that humans think differently. They do not rely on others. They plan, adapt, and execute with precision. We cannot predict their next move, and we cannot force them into dialogue. All we can do is observe and hope we do not provoke them inadvertently." Meanwhile, humans themselves were focused on practical matters. Colonies continued to function independently. Fleets were tested, and technology was refined. Every decision was based on necessity and foresight. Humans had learned that relying on others could be dangerous. They had been betrayed, underestimated, and attacked countless times. Every experience had taught them one lesson. Survival required preparation, independence, and careful strategy. Some council members began to realize that the humans' withdrawal was not an act of aggression. It was a deliberate choice rooted in self-reliance. They had observed how humans had survived environmental disasters, wars, and internal conflicts on their home planet. They had learned to adapt, innovate, and cooperate when needed. Now, they were applying those lessons on a galactic scale, ensuring that no outside force could dictate their future. Despite this understanding, fear persisted. Council members imagined worst-case scenarios, humans expanding silently, creating alliances without notice, or developing technologies that would make them untouchable. Every intelligence report, every observation, seemed to confirm that humans were not only prepared, they were thinking several steps ahead of everyone else. A delegate from a species with long lifespans and vast experience spoke privately, too. "Colleagues, the human strength is not just their technology, it is their independence. They have withdrawn because they can, because they understand their capabilities, and because they do not need the Council to survive. That is something no species should underestimate." As speculation grew, reports emerged of new human projects. Massive energy grids capable of supporting entire systems, fleets designed for long-range travel without refueling, and automated. Defense networks were being deployed quietly. The Council's intelligence could detect these developments, but they could not fully understand the scale or purpose. Humans had learned to operate efficiently, invisibly, and independently. Sessions became tense as members struggled to adapt their strategies. They realized that traditional approaches, diplomacy, negotiation, alliances, would no longer work with humans. Attempts to pressure or influence humans could be disastrous. The very fact that humans had chosen silence and preparation as their approach demonstrated a level of maturity and strategic thinking that few other species could match. Outside, humans continued to build and prepare without distraction. They did not boast, did not seek attention, and did not make threats. Their focus was on creating a civilization capable of sustaining itself in the face of any challenge. Intelligence reports suggested that humans were studying potential threats, anticipating scenarios, and preparing for contingencies far beyond what the Council could predict. Some Council members began to realize that humans' withdrawal from diplomacy was a deliberate lesson. Humans were teaching the galaxy that independence was power, that preparation was strength, and that reliance on others was a choice, not a necessity. Their silence was not empty. It was filled with purpose, intention, and foresight. Even as humans quietly expanded and prepared, the Council struggled to maintain order. Delegates argued, strategized, and worried, yet they could not influence human decisions. The species that had once seemed young, unpredictable, and inexperienced had now become a force that could not be controlled. Their independence was absolute, and the Council had no choice but to acknowledge it. A senior delegate summarized the growing consensus. We feared humans might strike, that they might act aggressively, that they might seek control. But it is something different entirely. We fear their independence. They have withdrawn, prepared, and strengthened themselves in ways we do not fully understand. That is their power, and it is unmatched. Humans themselves remained calm. Colonies thrived, fleets patrolled, and research continued. Every action was deliberate, every decision intentional, and every outcome considered. They had learned from their history that survival required planning, foresight, and independence. Now, they applied those lessons on a galactic scale. The Council realized that humanity's silence was more than a lack of communication. It was a message. Humans were demonstrating that power did not need to be loud, that strength could be quiet, and that independence was the greatest form of influence. The galaxy had underestimated them for too long, and now it was paying attention. Every report, every observation reinforced the same truth. Humans were no longer bound by alliances, treaties, or expectations. They acted on their own terms, guided by knowledge, strategy, and determination. Their independence was complete, their capability undeniable, and their patience unshakable. In the end, the Council understood that they were witnessing something extraordinary. Humans had withdrawn, not from fear, not from weakness, and not from anger. They had withdrawn because they had learned, adapted, and prepared. They had become masters of their destiny, capable of standing alone in a galaxy full of uncertainty. And so the Council waited, watched, and speculated. Humans continued their work in quiet efficiency, demonstrating a power that was subtle, deliberate, and impossible to ignore. The galaxy had entered a new era. Humans were no longer just participants. They were independent, capable, and decisive. And through their silence, they had already reshaped the balance of power. The lesson was clear. Underestimate humanity at your own risk, for they had proven that true strength was not in loud declarations or forceful threats. It was in preparation, independence, and the quiet confidence to act when the time was right. The Council had learned this lesson too late, and the galaxy would feel its effects for generations to come. After months of speculation, monitoring, and quiet panic, the Galactic Council finally received a transmission from humanity. It was brief, calm, and deliberate. For weeks, Council members had imagined what it might contain: threats, demands, or perhaps declarations of war. Instead, it was something entirely unexpected. Humans spoke with clarity, with purpose, and without any trace of aggression. The message explained why humanity had withdrawn. It described the repeated covert attacks on human colonies, the corruption, and secrecy within the council, and the failures that had put human lives at risk. Humans did not shout accusations, they did not demand retaliation, and they did not threaten others. They simply stated facts and made their position clear. They would no longer participate in a system that could not guarantee fairness, safety, or justice. Council members were stunned. They had feared human aggression, but what they witnessed was something else entirely. Humans had acted decisively, but not recklessly. They had withdrawn not to punish, but to protect. They had chosen independence over dependence, clarity over confusion, and foresight over impulsiveness. The lesson was unmistakable. Humans valued justice, preparation, and self-determination above all else. Observers realized that humans had sent this single transmission not as a plea, but as a statement. They were declaring that they would no longer rely on the council to define their future. They would chart their own course, free from interference or expectation. It was a message of confidence, calm, and quiet strength. The very fact that humans had waited until they were fully prepared before sending it made it all the more powerful. Some council members felt fear, others admiration. Many reflected on human history, the countless times humans had survived catastrophes, adapted to impossible challenges, and risen stronger each time. It was now clear that those traits had only grown in the vastness of space. Humans were not reckless, not naive, and not dependent. They were independent, resourceful, and strategic, capable of acting in ways that no one could fully predict. The council debated how to respond. Some proposed immediate reconciliation, hoping to bring humans back into the fold. Others warned that any such approach could be interpreted as weakness. They realized that humans would not be swayed by words alone. Humans valued action, preparation, and evidence of fairness more than empty promises or diplomacy for appearances. Any attempt to manipulate or coerce would likely fail. Meanwhile, humans continued their work quietly. Colonies thrived, fleets patrolled, and technology advanced steadily. There were no announcements, no public displays, no need for recognition. Humans acted on their principles, not to gain approval or fear from others. Their focus was clear: secure their survival, maintain their independence, and ensure that every colony could thrive without reliance on outside forces. Intelligence reports revealed that humans had anticipated nearly every potential challenge. Automated defense systems were sophisticated but unobtrusive. Supply networks were seamless and resilient. Strategic planning accounted for countless scenarios, including interference from other civilizations. Humans had not just prepared for survival, they had prepared for self-determination on a galactic scale. Council members realized that humans' strength lay not just in their technology, but in their mindset. Humans were patient, deliberate, and capable of acting decisively when necessary. They had learned from millennia of hardship on their home planet that survival depended on foresight, ingenuity, and cooperation when needed. These qualities had carried over into space, giving humanity an edge that no other species had fully anticipated. The transmission ended with a simple but powerful statement. Humans would no longer rely on the Council, nor would they intervene in its affairs unless directly threatened. They made it clear that they did not seek conflict, but they would not hesitate to defend their independence and interests. The message was calm, clear, and unyielding, reflecting the values that had guided humanity for millennia: preparation, resilience, and self-reliance. Council members could not ignore the implications. Humans had proven that independence was a form of power. They had shown that one could act decisively without aggression, influence without coercion, and command respect without threats. The galaxy had long underestimated humans, but now that had changed. Humans had stepped beyond traditional diplomacy, beyond reliance on alliances, and beyond the assumptions of older civilizations. Some delegates reflected on their own histories. They had often relied on authority, intimidation, or strict control to maintain influence. Humans had demonstrated that such methods were not universal. True strength, as humans showed, could be quiet, strategic, and patient. They could wait, prepare, and act only when necessary. And in doing so, they had reshaped the understanding of power across the galaxy. The Council began to reconsider its own assumptions. Humans were no longer a species to be negotiated with, controlled, or underestimated. They were capable of independent action on a scale that few other civilizations could match. And they had proven that independence, preparation, and foresight could be far more powerful than fleets, weapons, or political maneuvering. As humans quietly continued their expansion and preparation, the Council accepted a new reality. Humanity was no longer part of the old order it had created its own. Their withdrawal from diplomacy was not a rejection of the galaxy, but a declaration of autonomy. They had taken responsibility for their own destiny, and in doing so, had forced the rest of the galaxy to take notice. Observers noted how humans managed their colonies. Systems were interconnected, but self-sufficient. Defense grids could operate independently, yet were linked for coordinated response. Supply chains were efficient, adaptive, and resilient. Humans were no longer reliant on external powers, alliances, or oversight. They had become masters of their own future. Some council members felt a mixture of fear and respect. Humans had not only survived the challenges of their own planet, but had taken the lessons learned to excel in space. They had turned adversity into preparation, independence into power, and silence into a statement. The galaxy had never witnessed a species act with such deliberate and quiet authority before. Council discussions began to shift. The focus was no longer on controlling humans or predicting their actions. Instead, the debate centered on observation, understanding, and caution. Humans had demonstrated that they could act effectively without consultation, and any assumption of predictability could lead to miscalculation. The Council had to adapt to a new reality where humans defined their own rules. Meanwhile, humans continued to thrive. Colonies were secure, fleets were ready, and technology advanced steadily. Every action reflected a deep understanding of cause and effect, risk and reward. Humans had built a civilization capable of surviving without intervention, guided by foresight, careful planning, and cooperation when necessary. They had taken control of their destiny, quietly and effectively. The Council realized that they had learned a vital lesson. Humans had shown that power was not measured by aggression, influence, or control, but by independence, preparation, and the ability to act decisively when needed. Their withdrawal from diplomacy was not a retreat, it was a demonstration of maturity, wisdom, and strategic thinking. As the weeks passed, the Council adjusted to the new reality. Humans remained independent, prepared, and silent, yet every action communicated strength and purpose. Other civilizations began to reassess their own approaches, realizing that traditional diplomacy and power structures might not apply to a species as capable and self-reliant as humanity. The galaxy had changed. Humans had withdrawn from diplomacy, but in doing so, they had sent a clear message. They were capable of standing alone, guiding their own future, and acting decisively without relying on others. The Council understood that humans were no longer a minor player. They were a force of independence, strategy, and quiet strength. For the first time, the Council and the galaxy at large understood that true power did not need to be loud, aggressive, or controlling. Humans had demonstrated that independence, preparation, and foresight were enough to command respect. They had acted with clarity, patience, and purpose, reshaping the understanding of influence across countless star systems. Human transmission remained simple, Calm and firm, humanity would chart its own path. They would defend their interests, ensure their survival, and protect their colonies. They did not seek conflict, but they would not be constrained or controlled. It was a statement of strength, independence, and foresight, a message that resonated across the galaxy, altering perceptions of power forever. The Council could do nothing but observe, reflect, and adapt. Humans had proven that independence was a form of influence, that preparation could surpass diplomacy, and that patience could be more powerful than aggression. The galaxy had underestimated them for too long, but now that had changed. Humanity had sent a message without a word of threat, without a show of force, and without compromise. The lesson was clear. Underestimate humanity at your own peril. They had demonstrated that true strength was quiet, deliberate, and measured. They had learned from history, adapted to challenges, and prepared for the future. And through their independence, humanity had reshaped the galaxy's understanding of power. Respect and survival. In the end, humans Rima.